Everyone,
he lied.
I'll try to be quick, and I'll give you an intro and a short bio, and I'll run through. I'm not going to restate the question. I'll answer them, so hopefully you all have the sheet in front of you. I'm Travis Grantham, candidate for Congress in your new 9th Congressional District, those of you who are in it. By show of hands, just out of curiosity, about how many people know they're in the 9th? About half or so? Quick little piece about me. I'm 3rd generation Arizonan. I grew up in Scottsdale, born and raised. Went to Arizona State University. I'm a husband and a father. I have 2 young daughters. I own a business, an airplane business at the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. And I'm a National Guard pilot. I serve in the U.S. Air National Guard here in Arizona. I fly KC-135 at Sky Harbor, and I hold the rank of captain in that guard unit. Just got promoted to major. You're going to hear from a lieutenant colonel in a minute. And you know, I can say this with all honesty to you folks, and I'll look forward to the questions. I'm a constitutional conservative Republican, and I'm proud of that. And I put my hand on that document when I enlisted in the United States Air Force, and I swore to uphold it and defend it and die for it. Politically, I will do the same. And we have to start electing people and sending them to Washington, D.C. who think this way. We are $16 trillion in debt. That's all. A number that eclipses our entire GDP for 1 year in this country. It's growing by 6% per year. Our economy is struggling to grow 2 to 3% per year. I don't have to tell the people in this room that we're monetizing our debt. We're destroying our currency. A currency that, quite honestly, is, for lack of a better term, I'll use somebody else's word, a fiat currency. And it has to change, because the very platform we're standing here tonight in and discussing these issues will go away. Whether that's by design or whether it's a tragic accident, I'll leave that up to all of us to have our opinions. But it is the #1 single greatest threat to this nation, the debt. It's not China, it's not Iran, it's not Syria, it's the debt. So, you know, I'm proud to be supported by a few organizations. I'm not going to read off a list of endorsements, but one that I interviewed with recently, and I enjoyed it, was the Young Americans for Liberty PAC, YALPAC. And I don't know how you all feel about that PAC. I think they've got a great focus and a great message. I spent over an hour on the video conference with their questioning board. And a lot of those same questions are what are being asked here tonight. So I'm just going to start going down through this list, and I'll get through it as quickly as I can, and then I figured we'd go right into the Q&A session. Does that sound okay? Sure. Okay. So what is the purpose of government? To defend our God-given inalienable rights, by the way. They're not, there is a typo. They're not unalienable, they're inalienable rights. Just say it. Well, see, that's why I carry this. I read this. Believe it or not, when I say I'm a constitutional conservative Republican, I mean it. And this is a document that not a lot of candidates in this race or a lot of other races around the country have stuck their nose in even once. And it matters. It's the foundation of this country. It's very simple. I carry it everywhere. What does it mean to infringe? Or, I said I wasn't going to read the question. You know, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. You take one of those away, you've infringed on them. Or upon them. Our federal government today, I don't have to tell you all, has its hands in way too many things. It has its hands in every single aspect of our everyday lives, whether it's your private life or your business life, and it doesn't need to be there. And quite honestly, life, liberty, and our right to a pursuit of happiness have been being slowly taken away for years in this country. And it's being accelerated now. But I think that answers that question. Number 3, yes, it's relevant, because it's the U.S. Constitution. And it's the only document in the world that gives you rights that come from a higher power and not man. That's right. It's the only document that says you are not accountable to those who you elect to oversee you. You are accountable, and they are accountable to somebody who is a higher power. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about, and something a lot of people forget in this country today. No, the Second Amendment should not be modified. I do not personally believe Social Security is a constitutional program. I know what the Supreme Court has said. Social Security is a tax. It's not there as promised for the generations that are going to be collecting it. Do you oppose or favor auditing? I favor auditing the Federal Reserve System. In regards to getting rid of the Fed, I'm going to answer this way, and I'm always open to discussion on this one, and maybe it's something we can come back to. Yes, I would be in favor of getting rid of that system. That has done this to our dollar. And I know about the gold standard, and I know about a silver standard. But what really would legitimately replace what we have today and provide stability in our market? And I don't think you'll find many politicians that have that answer, but in response to your question, yes. I do not believe we should be part of the United Nations, nor do I believe we should be funding the United Nations. I do not support U.S. troops being under the UN command. And I've been close to being in that situation. You know, I deployed this last year to the Middle East and spent 35 days in Doha, or outside of Doha, Qatar, flying missions into both Iraq and Afghanistan. There's talk that they would like to relinquish a lot of control and decision-making of U.S. troops to the UN, and I think that's terrifying. I don't agree with any UN treaties, and I encourage you to go on my website, granthamforcongress.com. I wrote an article that got picked up on a couple different news sites during the NATO and G8 summits in Chicago. And I talked about the Law of the Sea Treaty, and I talked about the Space Junk Treaty, which all have hidden meanings. In the International Criminal Court Treaty, which I think is actually one of the most frightening propositions, because it would actually allow foreign entities to hold our elected officials and our citizens accountable for actions taken anywhere in the world. And we all know about Lost. That was being debated recently. Number 9, I don't like the income tax. I like the flat tax, but more than that, I like the consumption-based tax. Quite honestly, if I was given the option of either one, and the payback was to throw the entire U.S. tax code we currently have in the garbage can, I would probably agree to either, one or the other. I think the consumption tax is more constitutional. If that makes sense to everybody? Yes, I would support a complete private medical option plan in contrast to Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act. Under what conditions would you vote to raise the debt ceiling? Quite honestly, and I can say this looking you all in the eyes, as many as I can make eye contact with, no, none.
Thank you.
We have to stop.
Yes.
And this is an addiction in this country at this point. And until somebody stands up, or a governing body stands up and says, no more spending, no more printing, nothing's going to change. And that's the reality. Number 12, Article 1, Section 8, and 5 of the most important of your 20 enumerated or authorized powers. Today, I would have to say to pay debt, to levy and collect tax, to borrow money. Those are important. Perhaps one of the most forgotten and one of the most important to mention is the responsibility Congress has to establish a law of naturalization, which has been completely pushed aside. To declare war. I'm up to 5, but I'm going to say one more. To arm and maintain a militia. Number 13 is yes. First part of that is yes. Second part, you know, really since World War II, I have trouble justifying. I can tell you that post-September 11th, 2001, I do think we had a right and a reason to go after some very specific targets in certain parts of the world. But it needed to be limited in scope, and it needed to be very short-term and short-lived, and we needed to come back. But look where we're at. We've been there for over 10 years. There's no great plan of withdrawal. I think The reality of the situation is we know there's people that don't like us. I mean, I don't think anybody doubts that in this crowd, but are we really fighting an enemy that warrants the presence we have in that region of the world? Not in my opinion. Number 14, I don't agree with military conscription, and that's coming from a guy who's been through basic training and survival schools and pilot training and officer training. It's not for everybody. And the reality is we have technology in this country and in this world that is bar none to anything that anyone else possesses. And military conscription is not the answer. Number 15 is no. Number 16 is no. And I want to talk a minute about this because I had this conversation. I mentioned a minute ago, I went to Arizona State University and I majored in agribusiness. And does everybody in here understand that there's a mandate handed down by the federal government that requires ethanol to be put into our gasoline?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does everybody understand the effect that that is having on every single other aspect of our agricultural production in this country when it comes to feeding cows that we produce for beef, to feeding cows that produce milk, to consuming water and natural resources that go into producing that corn, and polluting to the point where it far outweighs the benefit of the ethanol and the fuel in the end?
Very good point.
Yeah. And I say that because a lot of people don't understand that vicious cycle. And that's the case with a lot of federal subsidies and mandates. And if you ever want to have an argument with a liberal and explain to them why ethanol isn't really doing anything for the level of pollution, explain to them what I just told you. Explain to them that corn takes an enormous amount of water that we have to pump out of the ground using electricity. And
a lot of gasoline.
A lot of tractors to harvest those fields. And it does take a lot of gasoline. So it's a point worth making. Number 17, I favor. Number 18, no. Number 19, secure the border.
That's such a hard question.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I'll tell you something. Would we have an immigration problem in this country if we secured our border?
No.
No.
Or at least not.
But then there would be cheap labor in this
Gotta get
country.
rid of the welfare.
Want to bet?
Exactly.
They'd be your kids, that's how it
I was
works.
going to say, our kids would start mowing the yards again during their summer vacation instead of playing video games. Learn some skills.
Number 20, yes. Number 21, this was an interesting conversation we were having a minute ago, and I take a little bit of a different approach on this. My biggest fear when it comes to genetically modified foods, other than the corporate presence argument that was made, is the fact that we're not only modifying the genetic code of these forms of food that our body doesn't digest as well as the natural forms, but we're genetically modifying them to contain herbicides and pesticides and things that, when applied traditionally, don't stay inside and on the food like they do when you harvest genetically modified food.
I wonder if that has anything to do with the cancer rate in this country.
Yeah, maybe.
And mandated government
Yeah.
healthcare.
So, that question to me, that's where it takes me. That's actually my biggest concern. It's unhealthy. I think in a lot of respects it's unsafe, and I don't think that the people producing it, nor do the people consuming it, fully understand what the effects are going to be long term. Yeah. Number 22 is yes. Number 23 is I'm going to say no, and then the second part of the question, I don't think we should have been there. And you know, it's amazing to me, Libya, Iran, these countries have weapons we gave them. And yeah, and at one time, they had a leader who was our friend. And we have effectively removed those leaders from power. And we've put another one in who we think is our friend, and where do we think we're going to be in 10 or 15 or 20 more years with that country? It's an endless cycle. Number 20, what was that, 23? Number 24, no. In fact, I'm a proponent of getting the Department of Education out of Washington, D.C. entirely. And here's a crazy idea. How about we mandate in the junior high or the high school level, at our state level, a course on the founding of this country, why those men came to this country and wrote this document, what this document means, and have it last for a year instead of some of the unnecessary courses we take to get to that. Number 25 is I would definitely like to see the state legislatures decide who the U.S. senators should be.
Thank you.
That's what we're doing.
The way it was.
Yeah. And what is your opinion on nullification? Now, my understanding of nullification, just I want to make sure I answer the question correctly, is the state is basically giving the end-all be-all decision, and they are able to say, no, federal government, we're not going to take that law. We're not going to adhere to that. We're not going to set up the state exchange as part of Obamacare. We're not going to do this. I support that 110%. The problem we have in this country is that our states are now dependent on our federal government for money. And again, the last question, let me just say this one thing. If we don't start sending elected representatives to Washington, D.C. who understand the representative republic and who understand what this country means, what this document means, what our country was founded upon, and who won't start fighting it like a war, stripping power out of the bureaucracy, it's never going to change. But our state level candidates that you meet with as well have to start being held accountable to not sitting at the end of the feeder waiting for the pellet to drop. And we have to start making our own decisions at the state level. So absolutely in regards to nullification. And then should we start do you want to pick people or do you want me to point to people?
You know what? Whichever you prefer. I like being able to stop people if I feel like they're...
You moderate.
So
I'm not, there's no way I'm
all right, let's start with the green shirt.
This is a yes or no question. 9/11 an inside job?
No.
Sorry.
And the blue shirt.
Your favorite program in the government and how much by billions you're willing to cut it. So what department or what program is your favorite federal program and how many billion are you willing to cut it by? Specific billion-dollar number.
My favorite department's the Department of Defense.
And how many billion would you be willing to cut that in the first year?
Probably by the hundreds.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you. We have a practice in this country called baseline budgeting. Okay? And every time we get pulled down this road of, well, you'd cut defense. Well, yeah, you're damn right I would. I would prevent them from continuing to throw things overboard from ships because they needed to buy new ones at the reset of the fiscal year. I would prevent them from flying airplanes for no other reason than to burn gas out of them and driving cars around in circles around the city on September 30th so that they could fill the tanks up before October 1st. That type of practice. But that needs to go federal government and agency-wide.
Yeah, you mentioned your endorsement from Young Americans for Liberty, and I was wondering, a lot of the policy views you've talked about tonight that was on their website but not on yours. So I'm wondering if you've slightly exaggerated your policy views to them and maybe to us here, or why exactly are those not on your website?
There is no way I could put everything on my website that's on this sheet and everything I wanted to put on my website and everything that every other person I talked to wanted me to put on my website. I mean, you know, I'm not hiding my endorsement from Young Americans for Liberty. And you can Google my name, and one of the first things that comes up in my search is Grantham's endorsed by Young Americans for Liberty. I did a press release. It was out on social media. So, you know, if I changed my entire message to this, I guess that would be what you know, you would be looking for. I can't really answer that. Just,
So
this is who I am.
I suppose it doesn't have anything to do with any backlash from maybe potential donors or any party establishment? Okay.
All right, let's hear about drugs.
What's your position on the war on drugs?
I heard that question. I think it's filled. It's a waste of our tax dollars. I think we'd be much better off legalizing,
Everything?
rehabilitating, educating.
Legalizing all drugs?
No, I don't think you can say, hey, take as much meth as you want, kids, here you go. I mean, you gotta be realistic, and there has to be some logic inserted into the situation. The number one argument I can see for legalization, just to use as an example, is industrial hemp. One of the finest products that grows to make ropes, all types of things. And it, you know, and it doesn't mean people are gonna be smoking their shoes. You know, so there's a lot there that's not working.
Is it a proper function of the government to legislate morality?
No. No.
That's what the war on drugs does, right?
Not entirely. But this isn't to be a debate. What's your question?
What's your take on what do you think is going to be the outcome of the RNC in Tampa and ultimately in November?
I think, okay, let's see, use my better judgment, inside voice routes. I think all you Ron Paulers are gonna be agitators. And I think it's gonna be fun to watch. And I think Mitt Romney's gonna get the nomination. Is that fair?
And I said and ultimately November. So
you're asking me to call the presidential election?
If you say that's what happened so far, then take it to November, what happens in November? Given what you say.
Just express your wishes.
I wish, you know, Mitt Romney wins the presidency by a point.
Okay.
Black shirt.
I got a question, Glass-Steagall, yes or no? Bringing Glass-Steagall back?
Refresh my memory on Glass-Steagall.
Glass-Steagall would unwind the banks and get them out of the Wall Street.
Would it undo Dodd-Frank?
Separates deposit banks from.
Would it undo Dodd-Frank? Would it basically be the opposite of Dodd-Frank?
Yeah, Dodd-Frank was basically
Yeah.
allowed the derivative holders to go
Yeah.
first in front of the taxpayer,
Yeah.
so.
Yes, yes.
And furthermore, why do you think we continue the Wall Street bankers to keep looting us and there's no prosecuting? None of these people go to jail. John Corzine collapsed his brokerage firm, stole $1.6 billion, and there's not even a charge out here. We just had a second one just happen.
Hey,
Black shirt.
Thank you. The Reserve Bank of North Dakota is my first question. What do you think about that?
I don't know.
Wendy, Google Reserve Bank of North Dakota.
It's an honest question.
Yeah, no, and that's an honest answer.
My second question is, do you think that corporations should have the rights of citizens?
No. Let me think about that a minute. Corporations should have the rights of citizens.
Or should they be treated as a person?
I own a corporation.
Legal system.
I own a corporation. I'm a citizen.
The corporation.
Are you a
Should it be treated as a person or not?
No.
Okay.
No, it's kind of a strange
But
question.
it is.
Are you talking for like tax purposes?
I'm talking about, corporations actually have rights of persons. Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
Does a corporation have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? No, I'm not, I know that, hey, I'm the one standing up here.
Okay.
I don't, I guess I understand the premise of the question.
Legally, they have the rights of persons.
Some of
Do you think that's a good thing or not?
Are you familiar with Citizens United?
You don't have to answer.
Really good one.
What was this?
Go ahead with that.
Are you familiar with Citizens United, when the Supreme Court says that corporations can spend money as much as they want?
I'm familiar with Citizens United that's given money to a candidate in this race. Search FEC
What
reports.
about campaign finance
Sure.
reform?
What was the question?
Campaign finance reform.
It's completely unconstitutional. And I find it amusing that it was written by somebody who already had a $10 million war chest.
Side door.
I have kind of a two-part question. Mine is, do you think there is a difference between belief and following a set of idealisms and the reality of actually following through with them?
Difference between belief and following. Could you read it one more time?
Do you think, what is the difference, well, do you think there's a difference between belief and like what you believe, like all of the answers that you answered? You know, very constitutional,
Okay.
those are your beliefs, but do you think there's a difference between actually following through with keeping with them? Like the whole
No.
Social Security is completely non-constitutional.
No,
What
because
is
I
the
have to go to, I have to
reality
go
of
to sleep at night.
Okay, we have one more question.
The other part to that is the same thing that you'd asked earlier. If your idealisms would put you in a place where you lost your seat, would you be willing to come home?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Try to answer your question to me, please.
Come on, Jack.
Sure. All right, so Trey surveyed this question to me, which is you stated that you were, that YAL, which was Young Americans for Liberty,
Yeah,
that they supported you,
they
and
did.
that you were against the national ID, yet you support laws like 1070, which Campaign for Liberty and Young Americans for Liberty both stated were backdoor forms of national ID
Right.
that tied us into the Patriot Act and voter radar. It's a two-part question. Are you against voter radar or for it? And
Against?
do you support laws like 1070 if they write in sections of national ID?
And I'm gonna answer that this way. I support laws like 1070 if they secure our border and make the federal government more accountable for doing its job.
Even if they write in programs like national ID?
No, if they wrote something in there that said we're all gonna pay an 85% income tax, I would not support it. If they wrote something in there that said you're all gonna carry a, I gotta show everybody this.
And Young
I'm probably
Americans
gonna
for
get, I'm probably gonna
Liberty
get carried out of here on a stretcher.
Thank you, Trey.
If you all were asked to carry something like this, Ma'am?
Tracking device?
ma'am, if you were all asked to carry something like this as a product of that law, no, I wouldn't support it.
Well, Prop 200 and the way that our current driver's license was, in line 1051E of 1070, it said that any government of any form, city, local, state, could turn over the information to any database.
Yeah, what does
It
that have?
didn't provide a secure hub for our information, so Napolitano fought for that information. Conservatives held the line against it, and then we used a big ruse like illegal immigration to just hand it over.
We've got passports, we've got driver's licenses. What else do we need?
Well, they're not voluntary. Those are voluntary.
Like I said, what else do we need?
He's agreeing with your position.
Yeah.
So you don't support 1070s. 1051.
You're not gonna get me on, I can tell you right now, you're not gonna get me on camera with the DNC tracker here saying I don't support SB 1070.
Yes or no? Voter radar.
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
How do you like that one?
Thank you. Oh, I love the call out.
Withdrawing all the troops from the bases, Japan, Germany.
Here, if anybody would like it.
Let the next person go. I'll answer your question. You want to come back?
Was that a yes or no?
Okay.
Withdrawing all the troops from the bases.
We have Wendy Rogers.
Thank you.